Welcome back to Copper Star Precision, the channel dedicated to getting you more points at your competitive shooting matches. I'm always looking for a competitive edge, and when it comes to the base class rifles, I have a little bit more room in the budget with my CZ457 MTR, so I was looking for maybe a scope that was still less than $650, keeping me in that base class budget, but they could offer me some more features. So I actually reached out to the people at Riton, and they were kind enough to send me this, the Conquer 3. Let's talk about it. In full disclosure, I did receive this scope from Riton, but they have no creative control over this video. They're not even going to see it before it comes out, and the opinions expressed are my own. So let's kind of do an unboxing and first initial impressions of this scope. So here we have the scope. It is the 3 Conquer. It is a 6-24 by 50. Comes in this nice box. It's got this nice Arizona skyline. They are based out of Tucson, so that's a plus in my book, being local. Inside the case we have the scope. It comes nicely packaged. We've got some foam inserts, scope caps, some Allen keys, a 0 stop, which is nice, some stickers, some warranty information, all that good stuff. So with an MSRP of $599, let's see what you get for your money. This scope has a 50mm objective, a 30mm main tube. It parallaxes from 10 yards to infinity. It has 6 illumination settings with off in between. It has 21 milliradians of internal adjustment with 6 milliradians per revolution in 1/10 click increments. It features a 0 stop, has a magnification range of 6 to 24 power in the first focal plane. It has a dual throw lever system and a fast focus eyepiece. So what originally attracted me to this scope was the fact that the reticle has 2/10 subtensions in the crosshairs instead of your typical 1/2 mil subtensions. And that can really give you an edge when you're trying to hold over and have that finite aiming point. So really excited to see what that looks like in practice. This scope, as well as other scopes in the Conqueror line, did receive a refresh in 2023. And basically they upgraded the knobs, the turrets, and the knurling around the knobs. So I'll actually link to a few videos for the old version of this scope if you want to see someone else's perspective on it. So let's dive into more of the features of this scope. So starting at this end, we have our fast focus eyepiece here. It is quite smooth, but it's firm enough that it's not going to move on you once you set it to where your eye sees the reticle in focus. Moving down to the magnification ring, we see it goes from 6 all the way to 24 power. But what's interesting here is how long the throw is. So if we put 6 at the top position here, and we flip the scope over, we know that 24 power is actually beyond what would be 6 o'clock if you're looking at the scope this way. So if you're going to use these throw levers, which I think you need to because the magnification ring is very smooth, but it also takes some effort to move. So you can kind of see how this throw lever here would stick underneath the scope. So that might interfere with your rings or your scope base or something like that. Luckily, it is a dual throw lever system. So there are actually some set screws in here, and we can change the position. So the first throw lever position is right in between 6 and 8 power, and the second throw lever position is between 10 and 12 power. So if you are choosing to use the first position here, right around 7 power, by the time you get to, let's call it 7, 8 o'clock, your magnification is about 16. If we were to use the second position here and put that at about 7 o'clock, we can get to the full range of 24. And because when we compete in these rimfire competitions, I'm usually between 15 and 20 power, I'm definitely going to want to move this lever to the second position. Now that's going to be easy enough to do with the provided Allen key. There are simply 2 set screws in each of the throw levers, so we're just going to loosen these. Shouldn't have to take them all the way out, just loosen them enough until this piece slides out. Same thing with the other piece here. Slides out like that, and we're just going to flip the positions of the throw levers to get it to where I will want it to be, because I'll be using, generally speaking, those higher magnification ranges. Just give those a quick snug. and we're good to go. Moving on to the parallax knob, we see that it goes from 10 all the way to infinity, and it's pretty smooth. From about infinity to a quarter turn, it's very smooth. Then there's some resistance all the way until 10. So I'll put this up to the microphone. So there's definitely some resistance there. And then from about a quarter turn to infinity, it loosens up nicely. Now granted, with everything I say here, this is a sample size of 1, and this might break in with time, but new out of the box, a little stiffness 3/4 of the way through the range of parallax adjustment here. You'll also notice that there are no distance markings, which doesn't really bother me because distance markings generally are pretty inaccurate, and it depends on your eyes and how you have your scope set up usually. So the magnification you use, all that kind of stuff. So it's hard to put actual parallax numbers in there. What I will probably do is I will actually go to a known distance of 50 yards and actually mark here 50 and probably 100 yards where I see them with the way I have the scope set up at a typical match magnification, maybe around 20 power, just so I have some reference points for quick parallax focusing if I'm doing it before a stage. Next to the parallax, we have the illumination knob, which has very distinct clicks, off positions in between each. We'll have to take this out in the field and see if it's daylight bright or if it's just for those lower light situations. Now on to the turrets. This is probably what every scope reviewer likes to talk about. A lot of scope reviews talk about how tactile or clicky or audible the turrets are. For me, it actually boils down to a few things that I look for in good turrets. When I evaluate turrets for competition use, I'm looking for 2 things. I'm looking for the ability to make fine 1 or 2/10 adjustments, and then make sweeping large coarse adjustments if I'm dialing up from a near range target to a very far target. So I think those 2 things are more important. Having that tactile feel is important, but it sometimes when you have either a fine or coarse adjustment, it's either you cannot actually make fine adjustments without the turret skipping, or if you make a coarse adjustment, it just skips over a whole bunch of numbers and you're fumbling around with the turrets. So first, let's see if there's any play in the turrets. Very, very minor, if any. As far as fine adjustment, a distinct click. And if I do a coarse adjustment, let's say I'm at my 50-yard zero and I want to dial up 1.8 for a 100-yard target, pretty good. And then from there, if I overshoot or undershoot, it does have that fine ability again to make nice, distinct, fine adjustments as well as coarse adjustments. Now you may have already caught this, but I'll put the camera over here. And if you notice, if I come right up from the scope, the markings on the turret don't quite line up with this line here. So they're always just slightly off. So usually when I'm dialing, I come off the scope, I'm looking through the scope, I come off the scope, and now I'm looking at the elevation turret, and it's just a slight bit off. And even worse, if I'm on the glass and I'm still looking through glass and then using my non-dominant left eye in my case, it's almost like it's at halfway in between the 0 and the 1/10 mark if I'm looking through my non-dominant eye, if I just want a quick peek at the scope to see where I'm at. And we're going to see something very similar for the windage turret. It's just ever so slightly off. Not that we, in competition, dial wind very frequently, but just something to notice. One other thing to mention is that neither turret is locking, which isn't necessarily a deal breaker, and I think there's enough resistance in here that even if you gently bump it, it's not really going to throw you off. You just have to realize that it is not locking. It does, however, feature a zero stop, which is a little ring that is included, and I'll have another video going over how to zero the rifle. But there's another ring here. We're going to loosen the top cap and be able to put that zero stop on once we have this dialed in. Well, that wraps up a first look and sort of my first impressions of this scope. Like I said, everything is very smooth, magnification is smooth, stiff enough that I do think the throw lever is pretty much a must. if you're someone who likes to change magnification frequently. I usually am a kind of a set it and forget it kind of guy, so not really a huge deal breaker for me. The parallax knob, there are portions of it where it is stiff. I imagine that will loosen up in time though, we'll see when we get it out in the field. My one criticism is going to be on how the markings on the scope cap don't quite line up. They're so close, but it's just ever so slightly off on the markings on the scope. And depending on how particular you are, then that might be a huge deal breaker for you. Or maybe it's something that you can learn to live with. We'll see how it actually works in practice though, and I do have some workarounds which I will discuss in future videos. Other than that, I'm excited to try it out, and we'll be using this rifle scope on my base class build for the August NRL 22 course of fire with the trigger cam, so you get some initial impressions there. And then of course I had that video about my testing rig. We'll be putting it through all its paces, looking at lens resolution charts, color charts, seeing if it actually parallaxes down to 10 yards, looking at long range targets, close range targets, all sorts of stuff, trying to test its color, its contrast, and how well it holds up for one of the more budget options in the Riton line. So make sure you stay tuned for that, and the best way to do that is to go down below, subscribe, and enable all notifications, because we'll be taking this to match, and you'll see match footage with this, and hopefully it helps me score more points. Thanks for stopping by. Any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.